Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Film Directing with Matt Macedo. This episode is brought to you by the Film Analysis Journal, a new book that I released only on Amazon. It is a journal that will help you identify and learn visual language, story beats, character arcs, and much, much more. So without too much self-promotion, let's go right into the episode. Actor meets the director with special guest, Brian Cutler. Enjoy. Awesome. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
So for those listening and watching, go ahead, please, introduce yourself and everything that you got going on.
Oh, boy. I've been doing this a long time, so let's go back to the ripe old age of 5 here in L.A. when I said I wanted to be an actor. My parents said, oh, yeah? Well, they checked the calendar section of the L.A. Times and said, if you're going to be an actor, let's go get you an audition somewhere. And I auditioned for a repertory company that was doing a wonderful children's play called Once Upon a Clothesline. And I was cast as a baby grasshopper. So my first professional role was a baby grasshopper.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Then I did live TV. That's how old I am. I'm so old that the Dead Sea was only ill when I was. Yeah. And then I did live TV as a youth or a ute. If you remember that, my cousin Vinny. I never worked on Ozzie and Harriet, although I knew all those people. I knew the Nelson family because I grew up with the gal that Ricky ended up marrying. Christy Harmon, Mark Harmon's sister. But I did work on Leave It to Beaver and Donna Reed Show and all those shows that were all black and white. And then that transformed into working on more TV, more commercials. So that's what I've done. I've been very blessed in the business. I've been a working actor, singer, musician for over 70 years. Obviously, the operative word is working. I've never been out of work. I've never had to have a job. Only my film and TV and theater. I love theater. I was a lead singer in a very successful folk group for quite a while and went around the world. Went to Vietnam, served 23 months, 18 days, and 5 hours in Vietnam.
Wow.
Came back, finished school, got degrees, didn't get a degree in acting because a buddy of mine and I who had been working for a long time. This is a fast chronology, but that's okay. I don't want to bore anybody. We had both been working actors for a long time. We were both out at San Fernando Valley State College, which is now CalSun or CSUN. And they brought in a gal who shall remain nameless from the Actors Studio in New York. And we'd already been, Frank and I had already been working. And so she had us crawling around on the floor doing primal screams and barking like a dog. And I looked at Frank and Frank looked at me and we said, this ain't going to fly. So he became a business major and I became a speech pathology and clinical psychology major. And that's what my degrees are in. And I'm a licensed audiologist or audiometrist. Did my internships in those fields, but never practiced, just got my degrees. Continued working, found Charles Conrad through my buddy Frank. We both had the same ideology about acting studios. We didn't like them because they were very cliquey. Most of the people that were there felt they were in competition with everybody else that was there. Frank and I didn't think it was a very healthy environment, but he found Charles Conrad, introduced me to Charles. Being the cocky, young, good-looking actor I was, I thought I'd get right into Charles' studio, but he had hundreds of students and taught 4 or 5 classes a week and then had some sub-teachers that taught. And I thought I'd get in right away, and I was told there was a 2 or 2.5 year waiting list. Mm-hmm. So I knew Charles lived above the studio when he didn't drive up north to his home in Westlake because some of his classes ran till about midnight. And he didn't want to take that drive. So every morning for 31 days, I was sitting on his front steps. And on the 31st day, he said, "You're not going away, are you?" And I said, "No, not till I get in a class." He said, "Okay, start Tuesday."
Wow.
So Charles and I studied and worked and trained with Charles for 12 years, and then he was my friend and mentor for 40.
Wow.
When he semi-retired and moved to Sedona, Arizona, Jill and I, who you just met, were married at the time, and we'd go to visit Charles. And then when he moved to North Carolina, Pittsboro, North Carolina, Jill's kinfolk are all in China Grove, which is not too far from Pittsboro. And we'd go visit her family, and then we'd go visit Charles and Pam, his wife. And he passed the baton to me, and I'm blessed to carry on his process. And I opened my studio 30 years ago. I didn't even know this, but I found out last week from people all around the world on LinkedIn. They send me congratulatory messages. So I got from Paris, from London, from South America. Congratulations on 30 years. I didn't even know it had been 30 years, you know. But also I starred in a very, very successful show in the 70s called the Shazam ISIS Hour. And this September, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. So
How cool.
time flies when you're having fun. So
Absolutely.
that sort of
What a
brings
fun
you up
life.
to date. I started the studio in Kansas City where I had gone to star in a play. And then the gal that ran the Missouri Repertory Theater saw my work, asked me if I'd sign a 2-year contract. And that 2-year contract turned into a 14-year contract.
Wow.
What does an actor want to do? You tell me, Matt.
It wants to work.
Wants to work, wants to act. Doesn't matter where it is. My little sister grew up with Rita Wilson, Tom Hanks' wife, and Tom said one night, even if he hadn't been as successful and lucky as he's been, he grew up in the Bay Area. He'd still be doing theater in the Bay Area because he loves acting.
Yeah.
That's the way I felt. I did thousands of performances of A Christmas Carol as Jacob Marley and Joe the Beatler, and then a myriad of other shows. Some the spear carrier, some the lead. You know, that's what you do in repertory. There was nobody teaching acting for film or television in Kansas City at the time. I had a couple of really good friends that were teaching acting for theater, but no one teaching film and television. So I bought a couple cameras, got a little space through a friend, started teaching. And so 30 years later, I'm back in LA where I'm born and raised. We've been back here a little over 10 years. And things are going very, very well. I'm very happy to say the studio is doing very well. We have an awful lot of actors working. We have a web series that we shoot. I'm a SAG signatory producer, so once a month we shoot a new episode of a SAG web series. We did our first one for the new year yesterday. It went really, really well, and we're doing one a month for the next 6 or 8 months. So I don't know. That brings you sort of up to speed, I guess. Hope I didn't bore anybody, but
No, they're all
uh,
still listening, I'm sure.
you know, I love acting. I've been doing it since I was 5. I'll be 79 in May. I know I don't look it, um,
But
but
what an amazing life, though, to be able to do something that you discovered at such a young age, too. Like I discovered kind of filmmaking at around that same age, and just to be able to do it my entire
yeah,
life is such a blessing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Spielberg started making home movies when he was 8. You know, so I mean, if you have Joseph Campbell, who was a brilliant philosopher, said, if you find your bliss, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, I obviously found mine, and
Yeah.
obviously you're finding and developing yours. So more power to you, man.
Yeah.
I know so many people that hate what they do every day, and it just changes your life. And I've been very blessed, very happy. Had my ups and downs, which you do in this business, but
Mhm.
it's been a good ride. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
awesome. Well, to jump into the topics that we have for the episode here, I know you hinted on it a little bit earlier with the classes that you took in New York, but I would love to dive into those listening that don't know the acting methods, like the different types of acting methods,
sure.
and if you want to, share their strengths and weaknesses along with them.
Yeah. Well, method, of course, has been passé for a lot of years. And there are a lot of actors that people say, well, so-and-so's a method actor and so-and-so's a method. But they really aren't. You know, if you look at actors like Robert De Niro, when he did Bloody Mama, that was his first film, and he was totally ensconced in that whole quote unquote method thing. And he spent the night in an open grave in a cemetery to prepare himself. And then a few years later, he said, "What the hell was I thinking? You know, they could have filled up the grave. Somebody could have killed me. I could have frozen to death." So, you know, yeah, there are a few actors that still use that process. Unfortunately, for me, in my experience, when I've worked with actors, whether in film or in theater, that utilize that process, and there's a wonderful example that Brian Cox and the rest of the cast of Succession talk about all the time, about having one actor in a cast of 15 that is quote unquote method, and how it slows down production, makes it difficult for people to work with one another. The whole method thing was based on Stanislavski, who was a Russian, a very creative Russian theater producer director in Russia. And you have to understand the name of his theater at the time. It was called the Moscow Arts Experimental Theater. What's the operative word in that phrase? Experimental. You know, and so what he was doing was experimenting with sense memory recall and things that you could do to remember something. And the thing that I found, having learned Charles' process, and what Charles' process did for me, when we get to talking about Charles, I'll go into more depth, but it took me from doing little bitty commercials and 5 and under work to spokesman in commercials and starring in my own shows and guest starring on dozens of major television shows. That's what his process did for me. Mm-hmm. So the thing about method is, first of all, if you look at the majority of people that supposedly use method, in my opinion, they usually end up going nuts, or they're extremely bizarre, or they OD on something. It's a dangerous path to tread, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. It's nobody else's opinion, just Brian's opinion. And you can take it for 2 cents or what it's worth. But there are a few actors that still use it, but they're a little extreme, to use your word. They're a little extreme. Charles worked with Sanford Meisner, who was a guru of acting, who had broken away from the Actors Studio and started his own studio at the New York Playhouse in New York. Charles was Sanford Meisner's right arm for quite a while. So anybody that studies with us, if they're into all that 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon stuff, we are all 1 degree of separation from Sanford Meisner. Now, that and $10 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. But some people think that's important. Charles, 20th Century Fox asked Sanford Meisner if he'd come out and run their new talent division. He was never going to leave New York. He was a New Yorker, and that's where Sanford was going to live, teach, and die, which he did. And so he asked Charles if he'd be interested. Charles came out to run the new talent division around 1970. I believe it was about then, at 20th Century Fox. And Charles, one of the reasons that Mr. Conrad, Charles Eric Conrad, that's E-R-I-C-H, the old German way, got along was we are both fundamentally iconoclasts and very defined in our feelings and opinions about things. And I don't think Charles liked many actors, and fortunately for me, he liked me, and we were friends, and he was my mentor for a long time, 40 years. So he came out. He didn't like the bureaucracy at the studios, which, if you can understand the studio cabal, it's not fun. So he thought, well, I'm going to open an acting studio here. And everybody said it had to be in West Hollywood or or Beverly Hills. And he tried that for a little bit, but then said, heck with that. I'm going to open a studio in beautiful Burbank. And everyone said, well, it'll never be successful. Well, I would say without equivocation that more stars, more executive producers, and more really successful directors came out of the Conrad studio in the 70s than all the other studios in LA put together.
Wow.
Someone can double check that if they want. But in my master class with Charles, Carl Weathers, who was a dear friend who just passed away, great loss to humanity and the acting community. Carl Weathers was in that class. Dee Wallace was in that class. Um, uh, Kate Capshaw wasn't in that class. Kim. Oh my gosh, I'm going nuts here. Linda Gray was in that class. There was a plethora of marvelous talent. Michelle Pfeiffer was in that. I mean, you see the names of people in that class. Mark Harmon was in that class. I mean, people that have gone on to do incredible things. Steve Nicolaides was one of my first PAs and ended up being one of the biggest executive producers in the business. I mean, it's been, as you mentioned, it's been a fun ride. But Charles changed a lot of our lives. Kim Basinger was in that class. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. Kelly Harmon, who's Mark Harmon's younger sister, was in that class. So it was quite a wonderful group of people to be working with and to learn and grow from each other. So I don't know what else you want to ask me.
But what exactly was you were learning from that class? So yeah, so Charles' method, yeah.
Well, he's the king of repetition. Oh, you're wearing a red shirt. You're wearing a red shirt. That's a lovely red shirt. I hate your red shirt. I hate your red shirt. Repetition, repetition, repetition. When Charles got out here, he thought that what was more important than the repetition exercise was learning how to tell a story through dialogue. And if you listen to Gary Oldman talk or Ethan Hawke talk, and I'm a student of my craft. I learn and listen to people every day, every night. I watch thousands of feet of film a week. I just watched something this morning with Denzel, and he was talking about the same thing. We are storytellers. If you don't learn how to tell a story, it doesn't matter how many times I talk about your black T-shirt. What our job is to take somebody else's words, make them our own, and tell a story with them. That's our job. So that's what Charles did for me. He taught me how to get out of myself, be totally other-centered, learn to work moment by moment and impulse by impulse, and most importantly, to not give a F word, because we're doing a podcast. I don't want to swear.
I told you it's fine.
Oh, it is. Charles used to say, until you learn not to give a fuck, you're going to be concentrating on all the wrong things. And you have to learn to trust your body. And once you learn to trust your body will allow you to take risks. He used to talk about insouciance. Insouciance is a wonderful word because it means childlike ability, childlike behavior. And we are all blessed with that sixth sense, if you will, from birth till about 12 or 13. And then a good relative, mother, father, sister, aunt, cousin, uncle, or a teacher at school kicks the heck out of us. Jill has a beautiful little voice. She's not an opera singer or she's not Barbra Streisand, but she has a lovely voice. But in the fourth grade, her music teacher told her, you mouth the words, you can't sing. So from the age of whatever that is in the fourth grade, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, she stopped singing and enjoying music. And then when we got together back in 96, she was singing in the car one day, and I said, God, you have a lovely voice. And I'm a singer and a musician, so I think I should know something about music. And I've been paid well for it, so I must know something. And she said, no, I can't sing. I said, you most certainly can sing. So that person stole her insouciance, took that Peter Pan-ism away from her And what Charles did was, with all of the people that studied with Charles and really understood his process, was he gave that back to us.
Hmm.
And what a gift. What a fabulous, wonderful gift. I tell my students all the time, if you have a little brother or a little sister or a cousin or a niece or a nephew that's 5, 6, 7 years old, take your index finger, stick it in the palm of their hand, and walk through a park or the woods or the forest with them and see what they see as they see it.
Hmm.
It's almost spiritual in nature, because they see everything, they feel everything, they intuit everything. And we all have that ability, but it gets squished out of it, out of us.
Yeah.
And Charles gave that back to me and hundreds of other actors that are working all over the place. And so to me, that was the biggest difference. Charles' process is, number one, don't give a fuck. Number two, work on your craft all the time. Number three, there are several things that we have to do when we're working on camera, and several things that we have to remember that to do every day. And the example I always use, based on what Charles taught me and many other people, was that dancers dance and stretch every day, whether they're working or not. Singers sing and vocalize every day, whether they're working or not. Musicians play their instrument every day, whether they're working or not. And actors in LA sit on their butt, wait for the phone to ring. And if you're one of those actors, when the phone rings, guess what, Matt?
You got to be ready.
You're not ready. And this interview I just heard this morning with Denzel, he was talking about at the Boys Club, where he had a great mentor, and he was a good track person, and somebody came on board that was faster than he was, and he got a little disgruntled about that, competition for once. And his coach pulled him aside, his mentor at the Boys Club, and now it's the Boys and Girls Club. But he pulled him aside and he said, look, he doesn't have the natural ability you have, nor does he have the stick-to-itiveness that you have. So it doesn't matter that he's faster.
Hmm.
See, we're all blessed with certain natural abilities that we have. And if we can find them, harness them, and then develop them, I tell my students all the time, your craft will support you when your knees won't.
Mm-hmm.
If you've watched my stuff, which obviously you have, you've heard me say that. It's true, and as I learn something new every day about this business, and I've been in it a long, long time. So that's what Charles did for me and for many, many other people that are big stars. He just changed our lives as far as acting was concerned, because what he did was teach us to get out of our left brain, which is our logical brain, and get into our right brain, which is our creative brain, and allow all the creativity, your muse, your angels, your God sense, your universal power source, whatever you want to call it, let that feed you. Don't worry about making choices. If you're an actor that wants to make choices, then you're limiting yourself to the opportunities that are available to you in the universe. The universe has unlimited choices. Why should we make one or two choices about something when the universe, if you're open to it through your insouciance and your right brain, why should we make choices when it'll do it for us? What Carl Sandburg and Mark Twain were often asked, how do you write such incredible things? How do you think of that stuff? They said, well, I don't think of it. It comes to me at night in my sleep. That's because they were open to that wonderful, special place that magic happens and comes into your right brain.
It's being receptive to anything that comes in. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to have, you want to be a director, then you've got to understand how actors work. If you look at the majority, and Ethan Hawke was just talking about this the other day, if you look at the majority of great directors, most of them were actors first, because then they know how to work with an actor. Mm-hmm. They know what to. I just saw, what's her name, Greta, who just did the Barbie thing.
Yeah, Barbie.
Yeah, she just said this morning in an interview. Obviously, I listen and study a lot. But she said this morning, she says she doesn't want to tell actors what to do.
Yeah.
They asked Simon West, well, how often do you rehearse before you shoot? He said, I don't rehearse. We shoot the first take. That's going to be the most exciting because probably they're going to make a mistake. And if they're good actors, they're going to work through that mistake. And that's when that magic happens. You know, you hope and pray that magic. You could shoot 10, 18-hour days in a row and not have any magic. And on the 11th day, something magical happens. Those are the days you pray for. You know, whoever you pray to, I don't care if it's Mother Goose, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, it doesn't matter to me. Just so you know, you're not it. You've got to have a higher source that you let go and let God, so that you're not thinking about what you're doing all the time. That's what I think method does. Method puts you in a mental state in the left brain, which keeps you thinking about everything you're doing all the time and all the things you've planned. And every great director that I watch, study, follow, and listen to them discuss directing all talk about never having a predetermined outcome. And every great actor I've ever worked with, and I've been blessed. I mean, I've worked with I go all the way back to working with Basil Rathbone, who was, in my opinion, the best Sherlock Holmes ever, you know, to working with some current stars today. You know, if you have a predetermined outcome, you're limiting yourself. I've never worked with a really successful actor, and I've worked with Lucille Ball, Robin Williams, Edmund O'Brien, Ruth Warwick, Warren Kimmerling, David Huddleston, Jack Klugman. I mean, I'm telling you, I've been blessed to have the career that I've had and work with the people. I always admired Mariette Hartley, one of the loveliest ladies in film. And I got to work with her and Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno in a 2-hour Hulk movie. You know, and so those are the blessings of this business. Mm-hmm. What actors have to remember is their job is auditioning. That's your job. You're going to learn how to audition well. That's your chance to act. That's your chance to perform. That's your chance to get the job. Once you get the job, it's a vacation. Doesn't matter where it is or how hard it is. You got it. It's yours, you know, and that's what the director from Barbie said this morning. She said, I turned the character over to the actor. It's up to them. I don't tell them what to do, you know, and I just popped a little one of our Pearls of Wisdom things about Gary Oldman and Slow Horses. I don't know if you've seen that one or not.
I did, yeah.
But at the same time that came out, one of my students also got a clip from Gary Oldman being interviewed about working with Chris Nolan. And he worked with Chris Nolan for 7 years on different projects. And in Batman, I don't give a lot of notes when I direct. People say, well, aren't you going to critique me? Aren't you going to give me notes? I don't believe in constructive criticism. I think it's an oxymoron. You can't build somebody up and tear them down at the same time. You know, I believe in critiquing. I believe in looking at footage and seeing what's working and what's not working. But Chris Nolan, in the 7 years that Gary Oldman had worked with Chris Nolan, who is a fabulous director, I think you would agree, said in those 7 years he gave him 2 notes. One was on the Batman movie. After he did a take, he came up and said, Gary, you have more at stake, and walked away. That's all he said. You know, you don't have to do a description of the universe and how you fit into the scheme of things in the storyline or plot.
Go into the psychology of the character and the childhood trauma. And
The heck with all that. I tell our actors all the time, Matt, first of all, you have no time to do research. Mm-hmm. You get an audition at 10 in the morning. You get a call back at 2. You have a wardrobe fitting at 4. You go home and pray that you get your script before midnight because you have to be on the set at 5 a.m. ready to work. When are you going to do research? How are you going to do research? You can't. And backstory, when the writers strike hit, I'm a very strong unionist. I've been a member of one acting union or another my whole life, and the musicians union. When the writers went on strike, I went to strike with them. I've also struck with firefighters, policemen and women, because I'm a unionist. I believe in what the union gives and offers people. But I asked the writers that I struck with, what do you think of backstory? And they said, isn't it rather presumptuous of an actor to tell me I've left something out of the story that I want to tell? And I thought, I've never done backstory, but I couldn't agree with you more. You know, if they wanted you to know something about the character, they would tell you, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what am I going to, there's a wonderful story that I share in class all the time. David Mamet was getting ready to shoot a project that he had written. And about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the executive producer called him, woke him up. They're supposed to start shooting that day. And he says, why are you calling me? And the EP says, well, I reread the script and it says that so-and-so was in Germany. Now, Mamet wrote the script, right? He's going to direct the script. He likes to shoot a lot of the script. So he's a real hands-on kind of guy and a wonderful director. And his wife's a wonderful actress. But so he says, well, how long was a guy in Germany? And Mamet says, how the hell should I know? It didn't matter how long he'd been in Germany. He could have been there 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 hours, 5 months, 5 years. It didn't matter. It's just that in the conversation in one of the scenes, it says the guy was in Germany. So you see, that's what backstory. If you're a cop, you have to know how long you've been a cop. Do you have to know if he's married or divorced? Not if it's not part of the story. You don't, and that causes all kinds of controversy. But I like controversy. As long as you spell my name right, it's okay.
But the thing that does make that so controversial is, like, I've been told, as a writer director, you kind of feel like you should create this whole backstory to help the actor better understand the character. But at the same time, it's like, well, you should just hand off this character to the actor for them to create it.
Let them.
It's like this.
Yeah. I just, I have people in class that have been trained to diagram a script, analyze the script, break down the script. And if that's what they want to do it. Fine. That's great. Whatever works for you. There's no one way that this works. There's no one way to direct. Some directors storyboard everything. Some directors don't storyboard anything. How come? It's the way they direct. Same thing with actors. I've got a couple of wonderful, very talented actors here at the studio that diagram everything. I've never done that. Never. And I've been a working actor my whole life. So if it works for you, do it. I don't think it's necessary to do it, in my opinion. Mm. But if you think it is, then do it. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, definitely. So something you were mentioning earlier is about active listening and never acting alone. So let's dive into that. So what is that? And you were saying keeping the attention off of yourself. And so the thing that I got from that in your explanation was being very mindful of everything happening around you, keeping it off yourself. So
you got it. The first page of our workbook says total concentration of attention away from yourself is a creative source of acting. It happens to be the creative source of any creative endeavor, but for our purposes, we talk about acting. We shoot everything at the studio ECU, extreme close-up. And the reason that we do that is because that's what Charles did. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Sure. So we do everything ECU. And the reason for that is, as I was saying, I am not worried about you being able to drive down the freeway at 70 miles an hour, eat a cheeseburger, drink a cup of coffee, and talk on your cell phone. We do that all the time. But can you be, I was driving down the freeway 80 miles an hour the other day, and a gal zoomed by me who was doing her eye makeup. So, we do stuff like that. But can you be comfortably still? That's the key. So I had the pleasure of spending afternoon and evening with the delightful, marvelous, extremely gifted and talented Morgan Freeman several months ago. And we talked about what was the most important thing he ever learned from all the stars he's ever worked with? And he said stillness and active listening. And those are the hardest things to do.
Wow.
Now, what do I mean by stillness? You can't be a robot,
Sure. Yeah.
but you have to be still. Why? Well, with an 85 millimeter lens, you have a 50 or 60 foot head on a big screen, which means you have 6 foot eyes and a 12-foot mouth. And if you're doing this,
Shaking around, yeah.
everybody in the first 30 rows is going to get sick. If you don't believe me, watch the Blair Witch Project again.
Yeah.
I know it was all handheld, and I know a lot of that was done on purpose, but you get my point.
For sure.
The point is you've got to be still. Why? There is beauty and strength in stillness. And if you watch really, really good actors, Morgan Freeman, Mark Rylance, Viola Davis, Meryl Streep, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And you watch how Gary Oldman, you watch how still they are when they're in an ECU. Now, in a wide shot or master shot, they'd be free, loosey-goosey, more like Gumby or Pokey, whichever you prefer, but not in their ECUs. They're still, they're focused. They realize the next step in that beauty and stillness and strength and stillness, the next step is for film, less is more.
As you say, film magnifies everything.
Everything. I compare because, someone said, oh, you don't like theater. That's BS. I love theater. I've done it. I did theater from 1950 to the year 2000 in between all the other music and recording and TV and film and theater. I love theater. But acting for theater is like acting with a chainsaw. And acting for film is like acting with a laser. So everything has to be totally energized, all alpha energy, as Charles Conrad used to say, but not energy leaks. That's my term. You don't want to have any energy leaks. You want all your energy to be coming from your center, your core, your chi, your eyes, because that old adage, the eyes are the mirror of the soul. And if you have 6 foot eyes, you got a lot of soul to look at. So those two things add up to what you just asked me about, and that is active listening. If you're in your left brain worrying about your next line or thinking about your next line, it's impossible to use active listening. So then what do you have to do? You have to do what Anthony Hopkins said in a seminar I took years ago at UCLA. You have to have the willingness to learn the words and the courage to forget you learned them.
Man.
And then you're in your right brain, listening to the other person. Watching the other person isn't enough. You have to see everything they do. We had a wonderful example in class a couple of weeks ago, a piece where there was no reason for the young man to cry, but in discovering the moment in the piece and working moment by moment and impulse by impulse, he trusted his body enough to be alert to the signal that his body was sending him, and big tears started rolling down his face. His partner was watching him, but didn't see him. You get the difference?
Yes.
You can watch something and not see it. You can watch a sunrise, but if you don't get the pleasure and the joy and the ecstatic feeling from watching that sunrise, then all you're doing is watching it. You're not seeing it. So if you're using active listening, your total concentration of attention is, in fact, away from yourself, and you are seeing and watching everything that the other actor is doing, but it takes extreme active listening to do that. And I could give you examples of films where a wonderful film with two really good actors, one of them being Morgan Freeman, where Morgan Freeman is going through this litany of stuff about his past, and you feel every nuance that he's talking about, and the actor sitting listening to him isn't responding at all. And that's because he wasn't using active listening. Because if you listen to somebody talk about a tragic experience or a horrible life experience, you have to react to it if you're listening to them. I mean, we've all been to a cocktail party or a funeral or a bar mitzvah or a wedding or something where you're talking with somebody and you see their eyes go dead and you know they've stopped listening.
Yeah.
Right? They nod their head. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you ask them, what did I just tell you? They wouldn't have the slightest clue. Because they're thinking about going and putting the moves on the girl sitting over in the corner drinking a martini, not listening to you, using active listening to hear what you're telling them.
Yeah.
So those are the three most important things that we discuss ad nauseum at the studio: is stillness, less is more, and active listening, and seeing what your partner is doing. And you mentioned it earlier. It's like having your antennas. You know, an ant has, I don't know what, 6 or 8 legs, but a centipede has hundreds. You got to be like a centipede. You know, you just got to be receiving impulses all the time, all the time. Otherwise, how can you respond naturally and honestly if you're not doing that? I personally don't think you can.
Yeah, but it is such an interesting dynamic of responding or being authentic in that response, but remembering, the lines in a way, which is a level of inauthenticity, right? And the reality of filming, it's like you're not going to respond as you would. You're saying lines, and so there is a kind of interesting balance there.
Well, that's the danger zone, and that's why Anthony Hopkins says the willingness to learn the words and the courage to forget you learned them. You know, he goes. It's kind of bizarre, but he goes over his dialogue the night before a shoot 250 times aloud in memory.
Oh, wow.
Now, he says that's a little OCD, and he knows that, and it's a little weird, but that's what he does. But answer this question. Have you ever caught Anthony Hopkins acting
No,
in anything you've ever seen him in?
absolutely not. He's embodying everything he is. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's working moment by moment and impulse by impulse, isn't he? And you know that wonderful sequence in Silence of the Lambs, fava beans, 13th take. He didn't do that till the 13th take.
Wow.
Because he got an inspiration to do it. He trusted his body enough to go. And what does everybody remember from that whole movie? They remember the 9 minutes in that interview.
Yeah.
Right?
That improv moment.
Yeah.
That magical improv moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the moments that Johnny Depp says you pray for those moments. You don't get them all the time, but you pray for them,
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. Yeah. So something you mentioned earlier was keeping the momentum going. So like if an actor forgets their lines, I think there's a lot of inexperienced actors that if they forget their line, sometimes they'll even say, "Cut, guys, sorry, let me start over again." And it's like, oh no, it's just keep going and improv it and get back into it.
Never say cut. Only the director, the DP can say cut, unless there's a sound problem, and then the sound engineer will say cut. But yeah, actors, no, never say cut. What do? Well, here's the deal. Everybody wants to know what's the best way to memorize. I don't know what the best way to memorize is. The best way to memorize is whatever works for you. That's the best way to memorize. I have actors that use apps like Rehearsal Pro on their phone. They'll put down the script. They'll do the whole script with both characters because the work we do at the studio is all 2-person scenes, all original material. I don't make my actors go find their own, and I don't have anything from TV shows or real movies, because if you've seen somebody do that, that's the way you're going to try to do it. So I have thousands of pieces of original material. Charles shared several thousand of his favorite pieces with me, which was a blessing. And then I've collected from students that are writers and extrapolating dialogue from books and short story anthologies. Just pull out the dialogue and use that. The one thing you don't ever want to do if you mess up a line, number one, we already said, don't say cut. Number two, you don't want to beat yourself up. You don't want to scream. You don't want to yell. You don't want to swear. That kind of negativity spreads through a set like a forest fire. So what you have to do is, number one, know the story that you're telling. That's what I tell my actors. First thing you do when you get a script, learn the story. What's the story about? I've already told them they have no time to do research or backstory. So what do you have time to look at? 5 elements. Brian calls them the 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, why. If you know those 5 things in the sequence that you're ready to shoot, that's all you need to know. I did a big controversy on YouTube a few months ago where I said, is it necessary to read the whole script if you're only in 3 sequences in the movie? No. Why? Why do you need to read what you're not involved in? Well, I want to know what the whole story is. Well, perhaps as your character, maybe you're not supposed to know something that's in the story. And if you know it, you can't unknow it. So why know it? You see what I mean? And that's controversial too, because a lot of people want to read the whole script. But my feeling is if I'm in scenes 1 through 8, scenes 30 through 36, and scenes 80 through 84, and I'm the bar owner, and those 3 sequences take place in my bar, why do I need to know anything else about the rest of the story?
Yeah, you don't. And in reality, your character wouldn't. So there's no.
You wouldn't. So why? So how do you keep it going? If you know the story, you stick with your partner. You take all that energy and all that focus and all that stuff. You focus on them. If your partner can help you get back on track, they will. If not, here's a Brian trick. If you're totally dead in the water, dead calm, as they say in sailing, no wind in the sails, cough. And the director will say cut. Somebody will get you a bottle of water, and you take a little sip, and you say to the script coordinator, where did we leave off?
Brilliant.
And they can tell you. And if you handle it that way, it'll be perfect.
Absolutely brilliant.
The one thing you can't do, though, is get upset, because that spoils everything. Number one, the more upset you get, the more you forget your lines.
Because you're inward at that point. Now you're thinking about yourself rather than.
Where do you go? Which brain do you go to? Left brain. No, you go from the right brain to the left brain, because then you start judging yourself. You start, oh gosh, I screwed that line up. Oh, how am I going to fix it? What am I going to do? And I tell people all the time, whether I'm talking to a group of guys or a group of students, if you're beating yourself up, you're serving an evil master. Don't beat yourself up. Everybody forgets lines. I gave you a list of big stars that I've worked with over the years that had been stars for 20, 30, 40 years that had all their dialogue on cue cards.
Yeah.
I've worked with stars making $500,000 a week that couldn't remember any of their lines. They were fed to them line by line. I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm suggesting you put into practice what Anthony Hopkins says, the willingness to learn the words and the courage to forget you learned them. And once you're in that place, it allows you the freedom and flexibility, as Jack Nicholson says, to trust your body, and you get an impulse, you go with it. And what a prime example of that.
Yeah.
Jack Nicholson is the king of that, because he goes with whatever impulse his body tells him, whether it's on camera, a big scene, little scene. But then he says, guess what? If you're doing an audition or you're on a set, you do something, you get an impulse, you go with it. If the director or the casting director doesn't like it, what will they say? Take 2.
Yeah, no big deal.
And who knows? Maybe they'll like that when they look at the dailies, or playback when they're editing. Maybe they go, hey, you know what? That's more intuitive than what I thought. Let's use that. Simon West said he loves for actors to make mistakes if they're good actors, because normally he'll use that footage instead of what he thought he wanted to get.
Interesting. Well, I know you even said at some point, don't worry about giving people what they want, because most of the time they don't even know what they want.
They don't know what they want. I was just on an audition for a national commercial. Got called for the callback. They brought in 15, I think 15 or 18 guys. Same role, spokesman, national commercial, right?
Mhm.
You with me?
I'm with you.
The age range went from 18 to 84 for the same role. Now, does that tell you they didn't know what they wanted?
For sure.
So how can you give them what you think they want?
Yeah.
You give them you. You be the best you can be. And then if you're physically right, you'll get a call back.
Mhm.
You know, if they want you for a role, they don't want me. If they want me, they don't want you. All of my students understand that we're a team here.
Mhm.
And that's why you mentioned our social media. That's a team of people that are busting their humps, making this studio more successful, better, stronger,
Mhm.
because there's no competition at our studio. Nobody's here competing with anybody else. The only person you're competing with is a person you look at in the mirror when you brush your teeth. And if you can't get past that, you're in the wrong business. This business will eat you alive,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely.
So,
So going back really quick to the 5 Ws.
sure.
So is that something that the director should know ahead of time, just for each character, even during a scene breakdown, know each character's 5 Ws, so that way you could just break it down. Like, what is the effective way to communicate to the actors? That's kind of like my main question.
I think it's up to the actor to find those things, you know, and then if they have any questions, they can always talk to the director about it. I think for you to give the actor, for the director to give the actor what they think the 5 Ws are, could cause some conflict in the development of that personality for that particular role. Does that make sense?
A little bit. You want to dive more into it, the personality of
Yeah,
it?
I mean, if I look at a scene and let's say the who am I? I'm a priest. Okay, where am I? I'm in bed with a woman. Uh, so that's where. Why am I there? I'm breaking my vows because I've fallen madly in love with this woman. Uh, when is it? Could be morning, could be afternoon, could be evening. So what do we leave out? Who, what,
Who, what,
where,
when,
when?
and why? Just where? I think you got it all. Yeah, when,
I think
what?
that's it.
Yeah.
So what if you come up with a different idea? If you say, well, your why is to make love to this woman, but you feel horrible about violating your vows to the church. Well, that's another thought that maybe I hadn't thought about. Maybe I love this woman so much, I'm willing to give up the vows to the church. Then there's an area for discussion, but you don't want to plant seeds in the creative mind, in the creative right mind of somebody that may give you something in that sequence that you haven't thought of yet as a director. See, Ethan Hawke was talking in an interview the other day, and he said the problem with film schools is they teach you the history of film, and they teach you about filmmaking, but they don't teach you about acting.
Mm.
You know, and so sometimes I'll give you an example. I was the first AD, and Jill was unit production manager on a short film we shot a few years ago, and there was a 7-year-old boy who was being abused by his alcoholic father. So I was the first AD, and I'm an acting coach. So I worked with all the actors, uh, just running lines, not acting, just running lines, just run lines, just run lines. It's what Robert De Niro did oh gosh, Taxi Driver with Jodie Foster. He got together because she was only 13 playing a hooker, and they wanted to make sure she was psychologically prepared to play that role. But then what he did was he got together with her every morning at a little coffee shop in Tribeca and just ran lines and got to know each other. Okay. So I took this little 7-year-old boy aside and I said, look, he said, well, what's alcoholic? I said, you don't need to know what an alcoholic is. All you need to know is that when your dad drinks, he's mean to you, he beats you, he yells at you. That's what you need to know. And we did several sequences that were really quite lovely. And then we took a little break, and I see the director over there talking to the kid, and he's doing like a 20, 30-minute lecture on what alcoholism is and how it affects a human being. The 7-year-old kid doesn't need that. Why? That's conflicting crap. All he has to need to know is his dad is mean to him, yells at him, hits him, and the reason doesn't matter to him, does it?
No.
No. So there's a who, what, where, when, and why that a 7-year-old doesn't need to know. Yeah, you can use the same analogy with a 27-year-old or a 67-year-old. If it's not something I need to know, why do I need to put it in my brain? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And people will argue with that. I want to know what a real alcoholic is, so I'm going to join AA and do research and find out what alcoholism. Okay, good. If you have the time to do that. Sure. I mean, if you look at Sylvester Stallone's body from Rocky to Rambo, there's a huge difference in his body.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But he had 18 months to work with a personal trainer, a coach, a nutritionist, a chef, a cook, to prepare him to make his body look like Rambo rather than Rocky. Okay, when you're a star, that's when you have time to do research. Until you get whatever star means, I don't even know what that means. But working actor is the operative goal. Working actor. Be a working actor. Be a Paul Guilfoyle. Nobody knows who Paul Guilfoyle is. I ask 1,000 people a month. Oh, do you know who Paul Guilfoyle? No.
It's Tony Fraga. It's the same.
I mean, well, look, have you ever seen this show or this movie or this movie? Well, that's the guy.
Yeah.
Really? Be one of those actors. Yeah. So you go anywhere you want. Nobody knows who you are. That's exactly the joy of living. Really for 5 years, I was the star, whatever that means, of a hit TV show. It interrupts your whole life. Yeah. Oprah Winfrey didn't want to have to buy her own jet. It cost thousands of dollars every time you put the key in it. But she couldn't go anywhere commercially anymore. So she had to buy a jet.
It's the negative side of fame, yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Jeez.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, I mean, yeah, it's great. I mean, something that one of my notes too is objectives and motivations. So sometimes, sometimes, as a director, you want to, again, as we're told, you should break down a scene and understand the characters' objectives and their motivations. And when we, as you said, you break it down, your objective is to get the job and your motivation is to get paid.
Well, that's my philosophy.
Yeah.
There are other schools of thought, I'm sure. But, you're too young to remember in English class years ago, they used to have you diagram a sentence. And you'd put a little arrow up here for the verb and a little arrow down here for the noun and a little line over here for the pronoun. So you used to have to diagram every sentence, and that was teaching you sentence structure. If you do the same thing with a scene, then what you're going to get is a predetermined outcome of that scene. In my opinion, this is just Brian's opinion. I do believe that your motivation and objection is to get the job and get paid. That's what I believe. Again, though, I said I have 2 or 3 actors that want to break down their scripts. They want to know everything, from soup to nuts. And if they do that and it works for them, it's fine. But oftentimes what we have found at the studio is their work isn't as spontaneous, isn't as refreshing, isn't as moment to moment and impulse by impulse as somebody else who doesn't do that. So again, it just depends on the way you've been trained to analyze or break down a script. My biggest challenge, or the biggest challenge for any actor, is the speed of which this industry runs. And you really, really don't have time to do a lot of evaluating and critical thinking, especially if you're doing episodic television. I mean, on The Secrets of Isis, we were a 6-day shoot because we didn't have a studio location. So we were considered a location company. So we shot 6 days a week, usually 18 pages a day. when do you I mean, people say, well, when did you memorize your lines at midnight when you get home before you take a nap to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go back to shoot,
Yeah.
you know? So when do you have time to look for your objective and your motivation? Again, we can go back to when you become a star, whatever that is. I don't know what that is.
You have the time
Uh,
for it. But yeah,
then,
I have the similar experience. I mean, not to that extent, but recently working on miniseries shoots that are extremely intense. I mean, I think our biggest scene or day was getting about like 30 something pages in one day. I mean, because
oh Lord.
scenes are like a minute or too long.
Oh,
Um, but I mean, it's just intense workflow. And I mean, again, I commend my actors too for just being able to look over, cold read a scene, and we'll get into cold reading in a
yeah.
minute. But to be able to look through a scene and then, all right, go for it, and they're immediately able to perform, act, embody this character. It is mind blowing to me. But
Yeah.
yeah, that process is amazing.
But see, in what you're doing, you are absolutely proving my point. You don't have time to do research
Yeah, you
or
do.
backstory. You don't have time to look for a motivation or an objective. You learn the words. James Cagney said it in the 30s. Learn your words, hit your mark, look the other guy in the eye, tell the truth.
Mm.
If you can do that, George Burns said, this acting stuff is easy. Once you learn how to lie, you got it licked.
That's true. Yeah, it's lying to tell the truth. It's
That's,
so strange.
yeah, that's what it is, So, and you wanted to ask me what now?
Oh, I think we were just talking about objectives and motivations, but I mean, there's a lot. I mean, well, cold reading. I think you said in terms of cold reading is very important to do every day.
Cold reading is an oxymoron. Number one, it should never be cold and it should never sound like you're reading. So what we've done at the studio now, we've shifted to saying sight reading, as in music,
Okay.
because as a musician, one of the reasons I got hired to do my very first film, which was Bye Bye Birdie with my very first film, I worked with Anne Margaret. It was her first film. Dick Van Dyke, Paul Lynde, Rita Moreno,
Wow.
Janet Leigh, and a cast of incredible stars, because I understood solfeggio, sight reading. I'm a musician. I was playing the cello when I was about 8. I should have learned to play piano, because then I could be singing in a bar somewhere and picking up women. But I never learned to play piano. My dad did, my older sister did, but I didn't. So, sight reading, very important. There are 3 things that I ask our actors to do on a daily basis. 1, sight read aloud 30 minutes every day. I don't care what you read. Charles told us, you want to be a really good cold reader, cold read the complete works of Shakespeare out loud. If you can cold read or sight read the complete works of Shakespeare out loud, or the Bible, not a new fancy version of the Bible where they've taken out all the thems and thous and those and these, but just the old version of the Bible. If you can sight read that aloud, you can sight read anything. Why is sight reading so important, in my opinion? Well, Charles drilled us on it. If you weren't practicing your sight reading and you came into class and he gave you a piece to cold read and you weren't up to snuff, he'd have you sit back down and give the scene to somebody else. Charles also did something I really loved that I may start doing. I don't know why people can't be on time. The excuse people use all the time is, oh, it's LA. Well, if you live in LA, you understand that there's traffic in LA.
Yeah.
So plan accordingly. Charles used to lock the studio door 15 minutes before class.
Wow.
And if you got there at 14 minutes to class, you were locked out. You paid for class, but didn't come to class.
Wow.
He did not unlock the door. I was taught years ago. I've had 2 great mentors in my life. One was Viola Spolin, who was my artistic director and director from the age of 5 to 13. And if you don't know anything about improv, that name won't mean anything to you. But any actor that knows anything about improv, Viola Spolin is the woman who invented improv.
Oh, wow.
She wrote 2 great books about it. And I was blessed to have her for 5 years to 13 years, and then found Charles in my early 20s. Two great mentors.
Yeah.
But the sight reading thing, 30 minutes allowed every day. There's a reason for it. Number one, now that the strike is over, now that things are opened up again, now that COVID is sort of on the back burner, more and more casting people are going to be having in-house auditions, right? They'll still be doing stuff. There are a lot of casting directors that figured out, well, why should I be spending $5,000 or $6,000 a month renting a brick and mortar when I can do all this online? Okay. But for a callback, they're not going to do it online. The director's going to want to meet you. The producer's going to want to meet you. And many, many times, I've had this happen to me over the years. You go to an audition with a prepared scene, and you walk in, and they say, Brian, what scene did we send you? Or which scene did you pick up in the front office? And you say, oh, the doctor. They say, no, don't read that. Here, read the serial killer.
Yep.
Well, you're a director. You know that. You change stuff all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. And so if you know how to sight read, now, oftentimes a director or casting director will say, oh, do you need time to look at that? And actors that aren't prepared will say, oh, yeah, can I have a few minutes? That slows down their time. It messes up their audition schedule. It's much better for you and for them if you can say, no, just give it to me. I'll do it.
Yeah. And it's such a subconscious message too. If you're ready immediately, they're just like, oh, okay. But they don't, it's all subconscious. For sure.
You've got to have the testiclicity to do that. That means balls, by the way. You've got to be able to take that script and not be worried about it. Oh, what's my character? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I have people that sit down here. Twice a month we sight read, and we do it audition style. We have them up on their feet. We have an off-camera reader. We have a person on camera. It's all done ECU. And I hand them a script, and they do it. And the people that are practicing their sight reading daily, about 2 lines into it, intuitively understand what that story's about. The people that aren't, don't.
Yeah.
And they read like this. Look at Spot. Spot is my dog. Run, Spot, run. We had 3 casting directors when we first reopened this studio here in LA. 3 casting directors did all their casting here. They rented space from me. 7,000 actors walked through that door. I'm in my edit booth right now, but they walked through the front door. 7,000 actors in 2.5 years. I would say 98% of them didn't know how to read. 92% of them didn't know how to audition. And around 90% didn't know how to own a room. And I tell our actors all the time, hungry actors don't work. If you're hungry, casting directors smell it. And the example I always use is, how come I walk up to a horse, the horse licks me. You walk up to the horse bites you. It's body chemistry. It's the energetics that you're sending out to another human being. And when I say own the room, when you go to an audition, Pacino says it all the time. That's your chance to perform. That's your chance to act, or not act, if you will. Sure. You know, to show your wares to a casting person, and just give it all you got, because as we've already discussed, they don't know what they want. So let them see the real you as that character. And you may not get that job, but they're going to remember what you did. And that's the important thing, you know, to own the room. Now, aggressive but not abrasive. Know something about the people you're going to audition for. Know what they cast. I have all our actors do research if they're going on a casting call. Know what project that person just finished. If you're meeting with a director, be aware of their latest film. Talk to them about them.
Yeah.
It's not always all about you. We think it is. But that's where we're wrong. You know, that's where that old adage, if I point my finger at you, I've got 3 pointing back at me. Yeah. You know? So again, back to being other-centered.
Someone, or I think you said it though, or someone said towards you, I carry your bag of tools every time I walk onto set. So what is What is that bag of tools?
This is a wonderful, wonderful actor who's now becoming one of the hottest singers in Nashville, who for the first time in as long as I can remember, took his wife and daughter to, they're in Cancun, and then they went from Cancun by the boat that floats on
Oh yeah, the bayou.
to Isla Mujeres. And I've been to both. And I think for the first time in probably 10 or 12 years, he and his wife and daughter have taken a trip. He studied with me for about 12 years to understand his presence on stage as a singer.
Mm.
He did do the lead in a film that we shot back in 2001 or 2. Everybody was walking around town saying, this was in Kansas City, with a script under there. We're going to make a movie. We're going to make a movie. I'm going to make a movie. And so my writing partner, Chris O'Connor, who's a wonderful filmmaker and genius when it comes to commercial work, and Jill and I sat down, wrote a screenplay, and 27 days later, we had a movie. Drew, this wonderful, incredible singer, played the dad in that movie. But Drew and I have stayed in touch ever since then. And he says that whenever he performs anywhere, he takes his guitar and he takes whether it's imaginary or not, I'm not sure. But he says he always takes a toolkit with him. And that toolkit has all the knowledge and information and instruction that we've ever talked about as a film performer. And he's applied it to his singing and his recording work. So he says he always hears when he's in a recording studio or he's on stage, he can always hear me whispering something in his ear. So that's the bag of tools that he carries with him. It's an honor for me to feel that he feels that way.
Yeah. How amazing. It was something that you, I believe that you said in one of the videos that I watched, when you said when it becomes personal, it becomes visceral for the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. When you believe what you're doing, the audience believes it. There's a wonderful example from the original Poseidon adventure film where Shelley Winters breaks down hysterically and there was this big, huge crying moment that she had. And everybody in all the gaffers and grips and everybody was so emotionally taken by that scene. Some of them cried, some of them sighed. And the director said to Shelley, that was wonderful. Can we do it again? But don't cry. And being the true artist that she was, she said, of course. And then afterwards, she said, why did you ask? Not before, afterwards. She asked the director, why did you ask me to do that? And he said, because I want the audience to cry. I don't want you to cry.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
See, when you're having the true visceral emotional experience and believe what you're going through and you trust your body enough to let that happen, then the audience feels it. Charles Conrad used to say something. He said, any actor in the world can describe a bowl of fruit. You want to be an actor that can make the audience taste it.
Interesting. Wow.
And many of our actors, I'm proud to say, I'm not being boastful, but many of our actors here at the studio allow you to taste the fruit, not just see it.
Wow.
And that's a gift that Charles passed on to me and many, many other wonderful actors and directors, that hopefully we can continue to keep the process alive because it's magical. It changes. There's an actor who's been with me a few months now who was with the same agent for the last 10 years. Okay. Good looking guy. Great body. Got a 12-pack, not a 6-pack. Something I've never had.
Jealous.
My dad in his 80s still had a 6-pack,
Oh, wow.
and I've never had one.
I had one. Yeah, probably when I was a baby. Long time.
But this guy, a few months now, he's been here, and in the last 2.5, 3 months, he's done co-starring roles in 2 major films, and he's up for the lead in another film.
Wow.
And he says it's all because of what he's learned here. Now, I'd like to believe that, but maybe it's timing. But I do know that there's been a total change in his personality, in his believability in himself, his believability to not give a fuck, and his ability to take risks as an actor that he wasn't taking before. And I think that's because of the process we teach, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like they're becoming, it's a form of therapy as well for these actors to go to the studio with you.
I don't ever like to confuse therapy with acting. A lot of acting studios have done that in the past. I think there's a danger zone there. I think what you have to learn to do is really be free with yourself, learn to trust your body, quote Charles, don't give a fuck, and be able, and this is a big challenge for some people, be able to let people see you, warts and all. If you're not willing to let people see you, warts and all, in my studio, in our studio, how are you going to let them see it at an audition? How are you going to let them see it on a set? You're not. You're not. I've got some beautiful men and women that are so closed. I'm chipping away. I'm like Michelangelo working on David. You know, he just got a big old piece of marble and then started chipping away. The David didn't pop out of there all by itself.
Yeah.
So I tell people all the time, you want to be a working actor, you got to be a long distance runner. This business is not for sprinters. If you're a sprinter, go do something else. Got to be a long distance runner.
Yeah.
You know, Scorsese just said, you know, he thought DiCaprio was a marvelous actor 30 years ago, but he hadn't had the life experience yet to do the film he just did. You know, not American Indians.
Yeah.
He said he couldn't have done that film 30 years ago because he didn't have the life experience. That's why it takes 15 years to become a really established working actor. And anybody who wants to do it any faster is blowing smoke. It just ain't going to happen. An overnight success in New York, Chicago, Nashville, or LA is 10 to 15 years. Oh, I know. Occasionally there's somebody whose cousin or uncle is I know. Those are the exceptions. Those aren't the rule. Adrian Brody's a wonderful actor, and his dad told him when he left New York and moved to LA, it's going to take you 15 years, son. So you're going to have some lean years and you're going to be hungry. And he says, okay, Dad, I can do it. And when he finally became an established actor, he called his dad and said, Dad, you were wrong. It took me 19 years, not 15.
Wow.
But, you know, it's a numbers game. But if you don't visualize your success, it doesn't matter how many numbers you go through. You know, I always compare actors to athletes. Larry Bird and Michael Jordan were two of the greatest ball players of all time. They were on the court an hour and a half before everybody else, and they were on the court an hour and a half after everybody else. So every day when everybody else was working out, they had an extra 3 hours a day on the court. So is it a miracle that they were better? Or is it because James Earl Jones told me years ago, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
And you can work hard or you can work smart. And I tell all our actors collectively, between John Keating, who's a wonderful actor, who's been with me at the studio a long time, Kai Abner, same thing, Jill, who's been with me since 96, and a couple of other guys that are helping head up our agency management accelerator program. That's something else we haven't even talked about. But between the 5 or 6 or 7 of us, we probably have about 300 years in this industry.
Wow.
So we ask our people, I demand it, they ask, to listen to us, make new mistakes, don't repeat our mistakes. Our old mistakes are old mistakes. Listen to us. Don't do what we did. Do what we're telling you to do. And it makes all the difference in the world. you know. So
Amazing. Something that, yeah, you say there is no try, there is only do or not do.
that's Yoda's favorite saying. I totally agree with it. You know, it's again like the thing I saw this morning with Denzel, you know, about the track thing.
Mm-hmm.
Look, there's always going to be a faster gun in the West. There's always going to be a prettier girl. There's always going to be a guy with a better body. None of that matters. It doesn't matter. This right here is what you're selling. The rest doesn't matter. You know, you could be shaped like a pear. You could be skinny as Twiggy. It doesn't matter. This is what you're selling. And you got to believe that you're marketable. We do a type and brand class here at the studio with the blessing of Bonnie Gillespie, who has the best book about acting that I've ever read. The only book about acting that we recommend because it's about the business of the business. But Bonnie lets us use her type and brand. And if you know your type and brand, man, you can pinpoint roles for you to do and casting directors for you to contact and directors that you want to work with. If you don't know that, you know, actors think they're right for everything. No, you're not. You're not. If you're a great director and your genre is mystery, it doesn't mean you can do a sci-fi film.
Yeah,
Stick with your genre.
Yeah, know your
Stick
strengths.
with your drawing, with your strength. Yeah. You know, I had an actor, a wonderful African-American actor, say to me, well, what if I get typecast? I said, well, Samuel Jackson got typecast as an angry black man. Did it hurt his career? Now he can do anything he wants.
Sure.
But if you're typecast, guess what? You're being cast. The objective in this point is to work.
Yeah.
You know?
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
So
something that you said too, that you've worked with thousands of directors, obviously, through this long career that you've had. And you said only about 5 actually directed people. So what was like some of the best attributes to the directors that you've worked with all these years?
Well, they understood the story, they understood the character, they understood me, and they understood the sequences that we were shooting at the time. And, Frank Zuniga, who just passed away, I loved Frank, fabulous director who had an intuitive insight. Hollingsworth Morris, who directed a lot of the episodes of Shazam ISIS Hour, had been around for a long, long time. Henry Lang Jr. These guys really cared about the story that was being told. You know, they didn't really care if you broke it all down, annotated everything, or if you just intuitively felt good about whatever you were doing or sad about what you were doing. But they were flexible enough to let you be creative. I mean, it's a collaborative effort, you know. I say it all the time. Acting is a team sport. You don't do it alone. Even if you're doing a one-man or a one-woman show, you got ticket takers, you got lighting people, you got sound people, you got backstage people, you got wardrobe people, you got makeup people. It's never done alone. It's always a team. So the directors that I've worked with, 3 of the 5 had been actors or had been directing for a long time and understood that relationship between an actor and director. You know, and I think that's a big plus. Again, back to Ethan Hawke, what he said, he talked about Redford. He talked about John Cassavetes. He talked about Woody Allen. He talked about all the wonderful actors that became directors, Warren Beatty, because they understand the fears and the weaknesses and the subtleties that actors live with daily, and not to mention the rejection. So if you understand those things, you can approach them in a very different way than if you have all your shots lined up. You know, Ethan Hawke was saying when he worked with Denzel would say, well, how many bullets are in the gun? You know, or why am I doing this? And Ethan Hawke said in a film that he just did recently, the director had his storyboard all done. And in the scene, he said, okay, when you do this line, I want you to walk over there. And Ethan Hawke said, why? Why am I moving? And the director didn't have an answer. And Ethan Hawke said, I wouldn't move on that line. I wouldn't walk on that line. It diminishes the strength of the line and my character. But if you have a director that's sticking to his storyboard and doesn't want the actor to interfere with his shot list, you're in trouble because and they shot it both ways. And which one did the director use? The one where Ethan Hawke didn't move.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you say it's a team, it's a collaborative effort. Mm-hmm. It's not just the director's thing. It's not just the DP's thing. It's everybody's. Everybody has to be in the same synergy. It has to be synergistic. Absolutely. You know, it has to be. Otherwise, you don't get great results. Mm-hmm. You know,
it's really operating in that intuitive state, but also trusting, you know, your actors. And
well, you know, Stanley Kubrick used to say it, and oh gosh, can't think of it. Anyway, they asked him. They had so many actors from so many different backgrounds, and how did you get that all to work so beautifully? He said, I hired actors I knew would do the work. There's an intuition that takes place with good actors when they're looking for a specific character. And if you're physically right for the character, that's 99% of it. If you can memorize the words and pay attention, that's the other 1%. You know, I have one of my actors that's been with me 5 years now, who last year did lead in a very successful feature film, and he auditioned for it. It was for a white 25-year-old to play a cop. That was the breakdown. He's East Indian, 5'9", and weighs 325 pounds. I worked on the audition with him. He submitted for it. Guess who did the role in the film?
Wow.
He did, because the director saw his character and loved it so much. He said, this cop doesn't have to be 25 and white.
Yeah. How cool.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, just go for it. Go for it. Do your best and commit the rest. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
What it takes.
I'm writing a book right now, actually, you know, based on some like improv films of mine, kind of going into intuition and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it
when it's done.
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
I'd love to read it.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely will. Speaking of books, great segue. There's a couple of books that you recommend. I know you were mentioning Self-Management for Actors by Bonnie, and then Mastery by George Leonard. And so
make sure it's the one by George Leonard, though, and not George Green or whatever his name is.
Yeah, the other one there.
They're two.
I did have a question, though. I mean, I know you can't speak for Bonnie, but in this book here, Self-Management for Actors, would that work for other roles as well, like Self-Management for directors? Can a director read that book and kind of know? Because I think it's diving into brand and all that, right?
Oh, I think absolutely. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think everybody in the business, writer, director, gaffer, I think everybody should read her book. I don't get a commission either. I love Bonnie. Yeah. We're good fellows, and one of my students has been a friend of hers for years, and that's how I was introduced to her. But she's great. She's a great giver in this industry. Great. She gives and gives and gives. She does charge for some of her seminars, but they're worth every penny.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, Jill and John just took one of her 100-day courses, and boy, it changed them completely.
Wow.
So yeah, she's a very special woman in the biz.
How cool. Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I'd love to get the book, just because I'm at the stage right now where hopefully some work and contracts are flowing in, you know, so I'm hoping to get an agent soon.
It will. We'll see. It will. Yeah. Inch by inch, anything's a cinch.
That's right.
What an actor has to realize is that when they audition for a role, if the director thinks they're right, they're right. You're right. You're right for the role. Don't question it. Then, as we talked earlier, you have to know the story. You have to feel comfortable going to the director if you have a question about something. I always say this: there are no small roles, just small-minded actors.
Mm.
You know, and you can't be small-minded in this business because I think we've already established the fact that it is a collaborative work.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a team. There's no I in team. There are plenty of actors that put I in team. And to be honest with you, the majority of big stars and very successful actors and directors I've worked with were always team players.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care if you're talking about Lucille Ball or Robin Williams or Basil Rathbone, they were always totally concerned with the total process.
Hmm.
So to have the freedom to go to a director and talk openly with them, I think is very important. And for the director to be equally as open to a suggestion
Mm-hmm.
by an actor. Now, not from a novice. A novice doesn't know crap, but from a seasoned actor, they have a sense.
Mm-hmm.
They know whether they should take a bite of their sandwich on this line or that line, or whether they should get up and walk across the room on this line or not that line,
Mm-hmm.
or whether they should sit down or stand up on a particular line or phrase. That's all intuition. And when you learn to trust your body enough and not give a fuck, and really learn to work moment by moment and impulse by impulse, and most importantly, trust the director and trust the actors you're working with, that's when magic happens in filmmaking. Francois Truffaut said it the best. Filmmaking isn't life imitating art or art imitating life. Filmmaking, according to Francois Truffaut, a brilliant French director, filmmaking is capturing life at 24 frames a second.
Mm-hmm.
That's how fast film goes through a camera.
Yeah.
And if you realize that and you're a storyteller and you believe what you're doing, you make magic.
Absolutely. And then I know a big thing for actors, again, trusting your actor, or a big thing for directors, sorry, is trusting your actors.
Oh, you got to.
And I mean, understand that they're in a lot of the time in such a vulnerable position, putting themselves in front of these people, and
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, again, back to just a really quick about communication, because I'd feel horrible listening back to this. And I was like, I didn't even mention action verbs or anything like that. And so, yeah, usually film directors or directors outside of, when they leave school, they usually get this book list of action verbs, and they're like, okay, I got to use, these words to describe what the actors or what I'm wanting out of a performance. And so how do you feel about action verbs and all that stuff? No?
I don't subscribe to them.
Yeah.
I again, back to the example with Gary Oldman working 7 years with Chris Nolan. He's gotten 2 notes from him, and one of them was, you have more at stake.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah.
That's all he told him.
Amazing.
So, I mean, if you want to use an action verb that is succinct and clear and poignant without pontificating and doing the life history of the word and taking it back to its Greco-Roman origins and doing that, that's I can't see why it would be harmful. Mm-hmm. But you just can't over discuss stuff, because then it all goes into the left brain.
Gotcha. And
not the right brain. And for both actor and cinematographer and director, you want everything to be flowing in the right brain, because that's your creative brain.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So really quick too, because I would love to ask you. You said earlier on at the beginning of this episode that you went to Vietnam, that you served in Vietnam. So
yes.
How was that, just as an experience for you personally, of putting, because you've been doing this your whole life basically, so putting something like that on hold, like your career and this passion of yours to leave and do something, I'm not sure to the level of which you were serving, but to just thinking, I don't know if you thought you wouldn't come back, anything like that.
Well, let me put it this way. The average life expectancy when I got to Vietnam was 7 seconds.
Whoa.
So, yeah, I don't talk about it a lot. It changed my life completely. I volunteered. I wasn't drafted. I lost a 7-year contract with a major studio because I volunteered, because if I had dropped out of school, I would have lost my scholastic deferment and I would have been drafted. And at that point, everybody was being drafted into the Marine Corps, and I've got nothing against the Marine Corps. They're a bunch of fine fellows, but I didn't want to be one of those guys.
Mm.
So, yeah, it definitely changed my life. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely.
So yeah.
And I mean, you
I was
had that.
proud to serve my country. Wasn't very pleased by the way we were all treated when we got home,
Sure.
but that's a lesson to be learned also.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah,
So
definitely. But I mean, you've clearly you have a lot of strong characteristics, from determination, from sitting on Charles's steps early on just to make sure you got what you wanted. It
he
really
wasn't going
is
to get rid of me.
I love it. It's awesome. Well, thank you, Brian, for everything.
Yeah.
Again, if you would please let everybody know your website, where they could follow you, your Instagram, all your contact info. Well, not whatever you will
Well,
share.
Brian Cutler Actor Studio. It's all there. If you want to hear more or see more or more pearls of wisdom or more discussions about actors or directors or films or limited series or episodic TV shows that I specifically watch to point out examples to my students of the kind of work that we're working toward here, those are the things we talk about in all those outlets. So.
Okay. And then again, please, I really recommend everybody go check out your Instagram. You have a whole team together putting videos out there. So yeah,
they're the bomb. All I can tell you, I'm so blessed. They're so great.
How awesome. All right, Brian.
Matt,
thank you so much.
Pleasure meeting you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Until next time. All right, bye.